Hello again, Adam here. Welcome back. Welcome to the writing process. Before we get started, I want to give you a brief overview of what's going to happen this week. Let's see if I can get this pulled up here. So we're now in week 2. Congratulations, good job. And we're going to be talking about this week two things. The first is giving you some strategies for having a process for your writing. Last week we talked about why it was important and give you sort of some broad overview. This time we're actually going to give you some strategies, and you can just pick and choose among them to find a way that works for you. I hope that by the time you leave this class, you've written enough things and had enough practice and opportunities to try different processes that you leave with one that's good for you. Maybe you've never thought about this before. Now's your chance. The second thing that we're going to talk about is grammar. And we used to spend 2 to 3 weeks on grammar, and then we decided that that was really lame. And what we would do is just give you the resources that you need to get caught up if you didn't learn all about grammar in high school. I can totally sympathize with that because I did not learn grammar until I made it to college as well, because I went to Okeechobee High School, which is the 51st ranked school district in Florida, and there's only 52. So Pahokee and Clewiston were lower than us, but we were a D school. When we made it to a C school, it was really exciting. We used to say that the C stood for quality. Anyway, I can hear you laughing. Maybe you're not, I don't know. But I can totally sympathize with people as they come through. And so one of the things that I've created for you all is this. This is the Adams Minimalist Style Guide. And what it is it's things that people in this class have done wrong for the past 4 semesters. And when I see them doing a lot of things wrong, I just add it to the style guide. And if you read it, it's 14 pages long, or 11 pages long rather. If you read it, I promise you that you will learn something new. Even if you're a grammar guru, you're going to learn something new because it's a lot of really interesting nitpicky things. So we talk about a little bit about grammar, usage, and style, what those means. A lot of you will be like, oh, I learned MLA and MLA is what we use. No, we use APA because we're grown-ups now. You used MLA because your high school English teacher was a literature and humanities major. Nobody uses MLA in the real world. So just it's time to move on. Anyway, but there's also the correct way to write academic degrees, addresses, dates, money, numbers, phone numbers, state abbreviations, and so on and so forth. And you guys will have to do all of this in this course. And so I put together this little guide for you so that you can learn some things, but then also have it as a handy reference. It's not important that you memorize it. A lot of people get really hung up on oh, I got to memorize things. What's really important is that whenever you run across, say writing an address in your, press release, for example, you can just say, oh man, I don't really remember how to do this. I'm going to go look it up. I've been out of school for 12 years this year, and I have an AP style book, and I still carry it around, and I still use it. So there's still things that I have to look up to. We also talk about some really weird words that give people trouble, like effect and effect, cite, complement and complement. This is what I would like for you to read and try to do your best to memorize because this is what your quiz will be on. I'm going to talk about the quiz in just a moment. And again, if you, it's a success to me if you're writing and you read, you start to write over for something over 100 people attended, and then you're like, wait, I remember something about over, and then you go and you look up and you realize that over is a spatial term, you can fly over the Grand Canyon, but more than is a quantitative term, and that's what you're looking for. So you would say more than 100 people attended the hoedown, not over 100 people, because you're not over 100 people. It makes no sense whenever you think about it. Anyway, so take a look at that. There's also some PowerPoints online, which is kind of the same information, just in a different format. Take a look at it because on Thursday, you're going to be given an IRAT-TRAT. For those of you who have never known the joy of IRAT-TRAT, here's how they work. You come in, you take an individual readiness assessment test, the IRAT. That's why we call it IRAT. It's also called a quiz. And you do it by yourself. You see how you do. I collect those for participation points. And then what you'll do is you'll get into a team of 3 or 5 and then sort of argue out, for a 1 team quiz. And so then you turn in your team quiz, and that's the one that actually gets scored. So hopefully together, the 5 of you will be smarter than any one of you. Generally, that's the way that it works. And then also you get to learn from one another that way, and you don't have to listen to me drone on about grammar because that would be lame. All right, any questions? You can't ask questions. Okay, so we're going to talk about the writing process now. Yay, get excited. All right, here we go. So the writing process from this perspective, which is the perspective of the Purdue Online Writing Lab, which I will reference a lot in this semester. You invent, compose, and revise. Why they did that counterclockwise, I don't know. And so we're going to talk about each of these 3 things. You'll notice that one of the steps is not writing. Like it's not the first and only step. I know for many of you, your process is I'm going to write and then turn it in. No, don't do that. You invent, compose, revise. Let's talk about inventing. Inventing is how do we come up with ideas for us to write about? And so you could devise a game plan, schedule the writing process. I have to do this myself because I get really busy and I put it off, and then all of a sudden it's midnight, the night before it's due, and I'm like trying to write stuff. Don't be that person. That person is stressed. So go ahead and schedule your time to try to give yourself time to complete the process. And be like, oh, I need to think about these things, and then I'll write an outline, and then do that a week ahead of time, and then maybe 3 or 4 days before it's due, write a first draft, and then thereafter. I know that I'm asking for a lot. Some of you are listening to me and you're saying that will never happen, but it'll help you. I'm telling you, it'll help you. Ask questions to explore your rhetorical situation. I don't know why they said that, rhetorical. By the way, rhetor, R-H-E-T-O-R, is just Latin for teacher. That makes it more sense, right? It's a teaching situation. Like a rhetorical question is meant to teach you words. Anyhow, so purpose, audience, genre, style, research. This sounds a lot like Fat P, right? And that's essentially what they're saying here. Why are you writing? Who are you writing to? And in what format are you going to be writing it in? So here are some strategies specifically for coming up with things to write about. And I will say that in this class, more often than not, you will be sort of led to something. Like this won't hopefully be a stressful thing for you. We'll give you a format, we'll give you a range of topics to choose from, and then you pick the one that matches you best. But some examples is, free write and brainstorm is always a good one. Say you're working in your group and you have to come up with 4 different blog posts for your group, one for each of you. And so you just brainstorm and you think, oh man, like what could these be? Like we could come up with 4 or 5 different or 10 different ideas, and then you pick the best, or the one that's most accessible for you. You could also map and cluster. This is one of my favorite ones. Like you just sort of write down things on paper, in a visual way. I'm a visual learner. And then when you write them out, you realize that some of these topics are actually the same topic, and you can lump them together, or draw things, or make a list and say, well, first I want to write about this, and then maybe in a week I'll write about these other things, and so they end up being useful. You could also keep a journal. I know that none of you are going to keep a journal, but maybe you could. I actually do this. Don't judge me. And when I have good ideas, I write them down, and then later on, whenever I need ideas, I just go back to my list of ideas. So composing is the next step. And the first step in composing is always to learn more about your topic. So conduct research. The next step is then narrow your topic. We have a rule, one of the things that I'll tell you, especially whenever we write blogs, is don't be epic. And that's, people come in and they're like, I want to write about hunger in Africa. And I'm like, wow, that's a really epic topic. It's enormous. There's no way that you can do that in 500 words. But if we want to write about a wheat shortage in Sudan last summer, that's narrowing the topic, and now we can get at that in the amount of time that we have. So develop the thesis. Don't let that scare you. Thesis sounds scary. Basically, what I want for you to be able to do is to be able to tell me in a sentence or two what your story is about, whether it be again, a press release or a blog or a white paper. When I come over and I sit down at your group and I said, tell me what you're writing about, if you can't do it in a sentence or two, then we're going to back up and talk in broader terms. If I come over and I sit down and you say we're writing about X and you can articulate it pretty well, I'm like, great, well now we can move on to organizing ideas. So sometimes just as a part of the process, the thing to help you, if you can write what you aim to write about out in 2 sentences or less, then that'll help you sort of focus, especially when you're working in a group, because you could all 4 of you be on a different page. But if you have to hash it out and write it down, everybody has to see it, and then you can all be on the same page. Anyhow, so last second at the bottom there, organize your ideas. Sometimes it helps people to write, an outline, and that way it could be like a mind map, visual thing, whatever works for you. Just do that, and then write the first draft. And you'll notice that the first draft is not the last draft. That's why we call it the first. It implies a second. Don't be that guy. Here's some strategies for organizing, and this really only applies to certain types of articles. But you could make an outline, and introduction, body, conclusion is sort of the standard outline. And what it does is it says, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And it's redundant, but the redundancy is meant to increase retention of the information. If I tell you something 3 times, you're going to remember it. An outline will be different depending on which format we're taking. Memos are different from business letters or different from press releases. And so, whenever you make your outline, just do it according to the assignment guide. If an outline is in fact for you, maybe it's not. I don't like outlines. All right, let's talk about review, revising and proofreading. Review, proofread. The 2 steps to revising. Okay, let's do review first. So review. Is the thesis clear? Is the ideas communicated clearly? Is the organization of the paper from general to specific? How does your paragraphs look? Does the conclusion restate the thesis? And again, overviews the main ideas. So these are all pretty straightforward. And then finally, if they're not, then what you can do is you can come back and refocus, reorder, add, and cut. And so these are things that you can do. Refocus is just, if you read through your paper and you realize that it's kind of muddled and rambling, you're like, oh, this paper, it needs focus. And so you can go back and sort of sharpen it a little bit. Maybe it's good, but maybe some things are sort of out of order. Like you read something and you're like, wait, maybe it would be better to know this before this. Then you can just sort of reshuffle your paragraphs. You can always add and cut. In general, you generally want to cut. Most people write things that are extraneous to the topic. And so, your papers can generally be improved by cutting over adding, for most of you, I would say. And then finally, proofreadings, when you come back and you actually, you're not reading for concepts, now you're reading for nitpicky sort of things. And so does the paper look professional visually? Is your spelling and punctuation correct? Are the sentences clear and easy to read, or any of them awkward? And so, just some ways to do this, just you can run spell check. You can read the paper aloud and backwards. This sounds weird, but there's some science behind this. So like whenever you read in your mind and you just read quietly to yourself, use a different part of your brain than if you read out loud, and then the information has to come back through your ears to a different part of the brain, and for whatever reason you catch more mistakes that way. Don't ask me how it works, but it's a real thing. And then lastly, you can always speak with your instructor or visit your writing lab. I wouldn't visit the writing lab. You're in a writing class, just come to class. And so finally, just as a review, real quick, invent, compose, revise. Real simple. If you have a process, follow it. It'll make you have better documents. If you ever have any questions, I'm always glad to talk to you in class. I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday.